What is up, everyone? I'm Gregory LaPerche. Today, I'm going to be talking about the first 3 books in the Wheel of Time, spoiler-free, and it'll be what I liked, what I didn't like. Also, I don't want to bury the lead, so I'm also here to say that I will be DNFing the series, even though I like all of the books, but it is, of course, a 14-book series, a 15 if you include the prequel, and I don't really love these books enough to want to go through the entire series. They're all kind of like 3.5 to 4 stars for me. But I am glad that I read the first 3 because this is kind of like a fantasy booktuber rite of passage to some extent. Prolific, it's very long, it's very epic. It's been around for a long time. The community has some great super fans and a lot of discourse around it. So yeah, anyway, let's get into the review. Also, I have not watched the TV show yet, but one day I think I'll get around to it. We shall see. So let's start with the things that I liked about this series. So the first thing I like is the climaxes to the story. I feel like everything comes together in a very cohesive way. All the characters seem to have well-developed arcs. There is a clear conflict and a clear resolution, and then there's still questions left unanswered for the future books. The second thing I like is the world building and just like the scope of the world and how it's so epic, and there's a lot of thought put into so many areas of the world, and that actually leads to the climaxes being better, I think. And we've got different races, different magic systems, different groups of people, and just obviously a very huge landscape. And then there's a lot of traveling, so we get to see the world. Sometimes I found the traveling to be fairly tedious, but nonetheless, I like the ambition, and I like how much world there is for us to dive into. The third thing I liked was actually kind of weird. It's the selfishness of a lot of our point of view characters, and obviously selfishness is something that's usually like a negative aspect to characters, but there are just some moments where Matt will say something like, "Oh, I've done enough traveling, we should just go home, like this is more than enough." Or Rand will have dreams about going back to the farm and just, living a humble life, but alas, this world and the situation that they're put in isn't really conducive for that. But the characters just having those thoughts makes them a bit more real to me. It adds an extra dimension to them, in my opinion. The fourth thing that I liked was that a lot of people don't know what's going on. And more specifically, I mean, let's say a main character goes to a town and they talk to the innkeeper or just like various people from the town. And a lot of people might not know things that happened in the last chapter or the last book because information travels at kind of a realistic pace for a medieval book. And it makes information feel like an important commodity that separates the upper class and the lower class. And usually like the more powerful and influential people have ways of knowing what is going on in places in the world that they aren't currently at. And also from previous time periods, powerful people have a more accurate representation or understanding of the history of the world. And again, that feels realistic to me, but it also kind of indicates a certain power level that a character might have. If someone knows a lot about the history or the world, what's currently going on in the world, I always think to myself, oh, this is like a very serious individual. It triggers a lot of questions like, how does this character know all these things and what are they going to do with all this information? The fifth and final thing that I like is the magic system. And at one point, this was kind of a dislike of mine because there were so many dreams. And I'm like, come on, Robert Jordan, this is enough dreams. We don't need any more dreams. Like, why does every 4th chapter have to be a dream? But the dreams kind of tie into the magic system somewhat. And that's just a small part of the magic system. The rest of the magic system is split down the middle. So women can use half the magic system and men can use the other half of the magic system. And it's kind of elemental. The women can use water and air and the men can use earth and fire. And then there's spirit magic as well. And the male half of the magic system is corrupted, so it generally leads to bad outcomes when men use magic if they're able to use magic. So yeah, that is interesting to me, and it ties into the world pretty well because like a lot of the women magic users want to find men who can use magic and stop them from using magic and sometimes kill them. So yeah, I liked that. And it reminded me of The Lightbringer a little bit, where in that series, if you use too much magic, you go insane, you break the halo in that series, and then the other magic users have to track down the person who broke the halo, and so they don't, hurt themselves or anyone else. All right, now we get to the bad things, or not objectively bad, obviously, but things that didn't really work for me and things that I didn't really like and I thought maybe could have been done better or in a way that I would have liked more. And the first thing is the villains I didn't really like. There's definitely a good versus evil plot going on, and I generally prefer a bit more complexity. I don't love stories where there's kind of like a dark lord and they are evil because they're evil, the mustache twirling villain. I'm just not a huge fan of that. But if you like that sort of good versus evil trope, then I think you would like this book. And it's a more old school trope, I would say, the good versus evil. But for me, it didn't work. And it didn't even work on like the lower level of villainy, where the followers of the Dark One, sometimes there can be like a boring Dark Lord, but the followers of that mustache twirling villain are more complex and have their own desires and motives, and the story of how and why they are following this like objectively evil villain, that's a story in itself. But for me, there wasn't even that like lower level villainy story subplot to keep me interested. The second thing I didn't really like is I felt like sometimes there were low stakes, because whenever there was a battle or a huge climax or anything of that nature, I felt like all the main characters have to stay alive. And also I feel like they aren't going to end the Dark One in book 3 of a 14-book series. So it lowers the stakes on that level. And then at the same time, obviously you aren't going to kill any of the ones that are the chosen one, or maybe the chosen one, so early into a very long series. Even with that, I still liked the series overall, and I still liked the climaxes, which is great. The next thing is that I felt like these books are sort of getting formulaic. And to give examples of what I mean by that, I know there's going to be a lot of travel scenes. I know the characters are going to split apart and then come back together in the end to take down some part of the Dark One's super evil plans. And I know there's going to be a lot of dream sequences. And some of the parts of the formula I really did like, such as, again, the climaxes. But some of the parts of the formula I didn't like the travel sequences, and a lot of the dreams I didn't like. I felt like there were definitely too many dreams. And I sometimes felt like characters interacted more in the dream world than they did the real world. And sometimes the dreams were interesting because characters wouldn't know what was real or what was not real in the dream world sometimes. But at the end of the day, I'm pretty confident in saying that if I continued reading the series, I still wouldn't randomly start giving books 5 stars. You know what I'm saying? Because these books follow a very specific formula, and I feel like there's too many parts of the formula that I don't like, to the point where I doubt if I continued, I would give any book 5 stars, but maybe I would. At the same time, it's also kind of a good thing, because I don't think I would give any of these books like less than 3 stars if I kept reading, but who knows? I guess we'll never know. The second to last issue I had was with the Aes Sedai and their culture, and again, some of the things about their culture I like the history and their like knowledge of history and trying to preserve history so they have more power, and I like the magic system again. But them as characters, as individuals, usually they and the elements of their society lead them to be like really unpleasant. They have such a strict hierarchy-based system that if you're kind of like a lower tier than someone that you're talking to, they'll treat you like literal garbage. And it gets kind of boring at times to keep following around characters that keep interacting with the most unpleasant characters imaginable. And I don't feel like there's a good reason for the Aes Sedai as a society to be as unpleasant as they are all of the time to everyone. And yeah, that kind of leads into my 5th issues. And yeah, my issue is basically with the way that male and female characters interact and how they judge both themselves and others based on their gender, like, so much. And obviously that exists in the real world. And that has existed in the real world throughout human history. And this is something that I feel like can be done pretty well. Things like gender revolutions for equality and stuff like that. Those are subplots that I generally like. But there isn't really any challenges, at least so far, to the normalization and naturalization of genders and differences among the genders. And a lot of times it'll just be like, men, or women. And like, that's like the extent of it. And sometimes that's okay. But I feel like a lot of the dialogue ends with that. And none of those systems are being challenged in any way by very many of the characters at all. And I'm going to read a passage, and I'm going to substitute out the name of a women-exclusive group to just the word group. So a character asks, "What does it mean to be part of this group?" And then a different character says, "First, you must love men. I don't mean be in love with them, but love them. Not like Group 2, who merely likes men, so long as they share her common causes and do not get in her way, and certainly not like Group 3, who despises them as if every one of them were responsible for the break-in." So, to me, that first question was, like, pretty easy. It was like, I don't know, like a very open-ended question, like, what does it mean to be a nurse? Or what does it mean to be an American? Or like, what does it mean to be like of a certain country or whatever? And what they go to immediately is their view on the other gender. And in no other situation in the world, or at least no situation that I can think of, where someone asks you, what does it mean to be part of this group? Unless it's like incels or some like really weird, bizarre, annoying group. Like no normal group defines themselves on what they think of the other gender. And yeah, in that sentence, that's where it's like the most explicitly said, but in many other sentences, it's kind of like implied. And those interactions overpower interactions that I feel like should just be like one human talking to another human. I mean, obviously, there's always going to be like some weird gender dynamics in many societies, but in this society, I feel like it's the most important thing in conversations that have nothing to do with gender, really, and nothing to do with how genders naturally are. And yeah, sometimes it's less bad than at other times, but to me, I still wish that it was less of a part of a lot of these books. And you know, sometimes it was okay because again, the magic system is kind of based on your gender, and things like what groups you can and can't join are kind of based on your gender in this book, in this series. And yeah, sometimes it's fine, but a lot of times I thought it took away from scenes and character interactions, and I feel like the characters think the way like a 13-year-old child does, like, oh, someone of the opposite gender, that's like a different species of creature on this planet. Like, how am I going to interact with them normally? And yeah, just most of the time I just wasn't into it. But yeah, those are my thoughts. And a lot of the things that I don't like, I feel like don't really get better as the series goes on, or that would be my guess, but maybe they do. I mean, you guys can let me know if you think I'm misguided. And yeah, like, comment, subscribe, and I will see you guys later.